Happy 4th of July and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show, we got some big injury news. A trade went down, two big promotions. Gavin Williams, not so great in his debut. And we'll do a little start, sit, or drop for three confusing pitchers. But first, happy birthday to Chris.
Oh,
Woo!
hey guys, thanks.
Yeah. Do you enjoy having your birthday on 4th of July?
I didn't really get a choice. So, it's fine.
It wasn't the question, Chris.
It was weird. Like as a kid, I never got to go to school and be like the center of attention. And like, I don't know that I have a lot of weird feelings about birthdays. Like I know Dave Richard on the FFT podcast, he hates his birthday. He do not mention that guy's birthday when it's his birthday.
All right.
But
he'll get angry.
I'm not like that. But I feel weird about it. I don't know. It's the day I was born. I didn't do anything.
It's like with most other things. I want the acknowledgement, but I'm uncomfortable with the acknowledgement.
Yeah, I think that's I want people to say happy birthday, but I don't want to have to text everyone back. I'm in a group chat and two people said happy birthday. I can't say thank you to two people. I got to wait until we've reached a critical mass and then be like, oh, thanks so much, guys. You didn't really have to. It's fine. Thanks.
They remembered you, Chris.
But, if you want to buy me a present, that's great.
Let's do that. Any big plans, 4th of July? Scott, Chris, anything going on? Nothing?
We are going to our first baseball game of the year.
Oh,
Red Sox Marlins.
That's a nice one.
Tomorrow. Yeah, I have a Marlins hat and I have a Red Sox hat.
Gotta wear the Marlins.
And
don't you dare.
I was gonna let my kids pick which one they wanted to wear. They're fighting over the Red Sox hat.
Why? I mean that makes sense.
Does it make sense?
They're better.
I feel like the Red Sox are one of those teams, and I wear a lot of different teams merchandise on the show: Brewers, Angels, Rockies. I wore a Rays hat on a podcast that you haven't seen yet. But I feel like the Red Sox are one of those teams where you can't wear it casually.
This is the thing. I'm a big Pedro Martinez, one of my favorite baseball players of all time, and I've been eyeing. I love wearing these mesh jerseys. They're great in the summer. They don't get hot, and I've been eyeing a Pedro Martinez one, but I don't want to be out in public and have people think I'm from Boston.
It's just too much baggage. It's just not that there's anything wrong with being from Boston, but being a Red Sox fan comes with too many presumptions.
Yeah, I would never wear a Yankees.
Yankees, same thing.
There's no way.
Mets,
I like some of their stuff.
I'm to that point with the Phillies, but that's speaking as a Braves fan.
Oh, I love the Phillies.
Cubs and Cardinals, I feel like, are kind of borderline.
Yeah, honestly, it just comes down to aesthetic. I just don't like the Yankees aesthetic very much. It's boring.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the reason, Chris. Nah, I get it. That's totally fine. Let's talk about baseball because I'm sure people want to
talking about baseball
more than this. Let's jump in.
Holy Toledo! The element of surprise reigns supreme.
All right, birthday boy, you are up. Player of the night.
Can you play the audio from last night? Because I kind of nailed this one.
Yep, this was our own Chris Towers on yesterday's podcast.
We're going to come on here on Wednesday night, and we're going to talk about I can't believe Andrew Abbott did it again. You're going to play the drop from Breaking Bad and all that stuff because he's going to have, 4 hits, 1 earned run over 5 2/3 innings with 3 strikeouts tonight. We're going to be so mad. I mean, 6 1/3 inning, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 2 strikeouts with 4 walks is what Andrew Abbott actually did against the Yankees. He can't keep getting away with it. He keeps getting away with it. This is another one where 5 hard hit balls. I think it was only 2 batted balls with an expected batting average over 500. He just generated a ton of weak, relatively harmless contact. His ERA is down to 3.28, and I still just think there's nothing there. And I hate that there have been so many times this season, including at least one more time within the next 5 minutes or so, where we've had to say, yes, this was a great performance by this pitcher. No, we do not care at all, even a little bit, for fantasy. And I think we care more about Andrew Abbott than, say, Sean Estes or Joey Estes, excuse me. But yeah, I still I have no faith in Andrew Abbott continuing to be a useful fantasy pitcher. He had 4 walks and 2 strikeouts today, and he limited the Yankees to 1 earned run. I can't. I'm sorry. I can't buy into that. And if he has a 3.28 ERA the rest of the way, I guess I'll look like an idiot. I'm just not going to buy into it.
You know, you make a good point. This year, my 17th year covering fantasy baseball for CBS, more than any other year, this year, everything's just kind of stayed stagnant. From all the times we say in April, okay, regression to the mean is coming. He's doing this thing now, but it's going to get back to normal. And here we are in July, and very few of those players have gotten back to normal. We sound like a bunch of blowhards who don't know what we're talking about. When I have 17 years of experience, and it pretty much always goes the way we laid out early in the season. Yeah. It's been weird in terms of how everybody's just kind of stayed in the path that they set at the start of the year. Still saying it's not going to happen all year.
Yeah.
But it's been weird how long it has happened.
It's frustrating having the same conversations every day about pitchers who we know aren't very good. And the thing to keep in mind is, in this environment, Andrew Abbott's 3.28 ERA and 1.20 WHIP with 74 strikeouts and 96 innings, it's actually not that valuable anyway. Even though, the numbers look pretty good. So we have to talk about them, but I just wish I had something else to say about these pitching performances,
I hate to defy a good bit because I mostly agree with everything on Andrew Abbott. The one thing that I will add is that if these matchups are correct for next week, he gets the Rockies in Cincinnati and the Marlins. Now, both of those starts are in Cincinnati, so anything can happen. But
he could be.
You can't really get a 2-start
and like
in those matchups.
There are some pitchers who have had good performances this season where I actually just don't care about it. Andrew Abbott, it's not like he's without merit. We have seen stretches from him where he's gotten strikeouts. He has done a very good job of limiting hard contact this season. His expected WOBA, 326 allowed so far this season. 326 expected WOBA on contact, that is. So that's an elite mark. He's getting a ton of pop-ups. It's not that he's just terrible. It's just that he's in over his head. And while I think Rockies and Marlins should go pretty well for him in a 2-star week next week, I think you can probably drop him there. And if he has 2 bad starts, even against the Rockies and Marlins, I'm not going to be surprised at all.
All right. FIP and XFIP, for what it's worth, both say he's terrible. Near 5.
It's basically just xERA, which is it was 3.48 entering the start, 3.41 ERA entering the start, because he's generating so much weak contact. It comes down to just not believing he's going to continue to be able to generate this much weak contact.
All right, Scott, over to you, player of the night.
My player of the night is Dean Kremer, who is even more available than Andrew Abbott, and I think that should change. He was pretty useful before going on the IL with not even sure what he had. A triceps injury. He'd been out since May 20th. His final start before going on the IL was bad and brought his ERA up over 4. But prior to that, he had been pretty useful for fantasy. Obviously has the Orioles offense backing him, generally pitches deep into games, kind of useful in that Kyle Gibson sort of way. He comes back after that 6-7 week absence, whatever it was, and looks the best he ever has. Only goes 5 innings at the Mariners' first start back from the IL, but he allowed no runs, 2 hits, struck out 8, had 16 swinging strikes on 83 pitches, including 8 on his fastball and 7 on his splitter. And that's what really stands out to me, the splitter. He threw it 31% of the time, up from 13% previously. And it was up 1.3 miles per hour. It's not like his velo was up across the board. That pitch specifically, like he had gone to work on that pitch and was clearly featuring it in a way he hadn't before. Prior to it, even when he was throwing it 13% of the time with reduced velocity, the splitter was Kremer's best swing and miss pitch anyway. But it was at another level in this return from the IL. And considering he was already useful just as he was, maybe this will normalize. Maybe the splitter will look like it was prior to the IL stint next time out. I don't know. If nothing else, it bears watching. But that's like, even if that happens, he's still worth picking up. He's less than 50% rostered. If this splitter turns out to be a transformative pitch for Dean Kremer and introduces all new upside, particularly strikeout upside, then that's all the more reason. The prospect of that is even more reason that he's worth picking up. And he lines up for 2 starts next week too.
Yeah, and it does appear to have been a conscious change. We can't say that for sure until he talks about it, but the spin rate, not just the velocity, the spin rate was up 325 RPMs from 777 to 1102. So, this is a new pitch for Dean Kremer. It's one he wasn't throwing last year. Last year, he had a more traditional changeup that had, a decent statistical profile, but the splitter has been a much better pitch for him this season. So this is definitely something worth watching. He's clearly still tinkering with that pitch to try to find the right answers. And the way it looked today, yeah, it could be a really, really useful second pitch for him.
Who would you guys rather have between Abbott and Kremer?
Oh, Kremer.
Kremer.
Okay.
We said it the exact same way.
I think I agree. I think if you just need a pitcher for next week with those matchups, I might take Abbott, but rest of the season, I think Kremer probably has more upside, especially.
Does anyone have Kremer's
Orioles
matchups ahead of him?
Kremer's Cubs and Yankees.
Yeah.
Cubs are not that good of a matchup. I think they've fallen into the bottom third in runs scored. So they're not that bad of a matchup. 19th in runs scored.
Yankees are not great right now, but I think we're still worried about them.
I'm not just saying this because I'm a pessimistic Yankee fan, but their lineup is bad right now.
They only have 2 guys, I think, with a way to run creative plus above 100 right now. They only have 2 above average hitters. They're just arguably the two best hitters in baseball.
I agree with what you're originally saying, Frank. Dean Kremer is the gutsier start with his 2 matchups than Abbott is with his 2, but I definitely like the upside of Kremer more.
All right, let's talk about Joey Estes, who turned in a Maddox. That's right. A complete game shutout in less than 100 pitches. A 5-hit shutout for Joey Estes going up against the Angels, a team that he has faced 2 times in a row. And normally you would figure, all right, that should favor the offense. But turns out Joey Estes just came out here and shoved because the Angels lineup is not very good. But I don't want to take anything away. It was a great start for him. 15 whiffs on 92 pitches. 11 of those came on his fastball, 3 on the sweeper. And he's a weird pitcher because he leans on his fastball a lot. Entering the start, he used it 56% of the time. He threw it over 60% in this outing. And as I mentioned, the fastball was really good. I don't really see anything in terms of the velocity. Maybe it's, one of these deceptive fastballs. He does get a lot of fly balls. So just kind of an interesting pitcher to figure out. Last 7 starts for what it's worth. Joey Estes, a 3.18 ERA, a 103 whip, well below a strikeout per inning. He's 9% rostered. Is there anything here in deeper leagues? Joey Estes.
Not really. No, it'll take a lot more of this for me to warm up to Joey Estes.
Yeah, he's at Boston and at Philadelphia next week. So
yikes.
No, not someone I'm particularly interested in adding.
All right, well, great start, Joey Estes, but we need to see more if it's going to matter in fantasy. Reminder, we will not be live on YouTube later tonight with our normal Thursday recap since it's 4th of July. Instead, we recorded sleepers, breakouts, and busts for the second half of the season, and that will drop on Friday morning. One more reminder that you can always listen to FBT and our 5-minute podcast, FBT and 5, on Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, you can scan the QR code. That will take you right to the FBT feed on Spotify. Let's take our first break. When we return, 2 big promotions. We'll talk about that right after this.
At CBS Sports Golazo Network, we're bringing you the game.
The madness of Messi arrives!
Breaking down the game.
This is unlike anything else in the world.
And changing the game.
Get it all for nil.
That means free.
Whoa.
And all day long.
24/7.
Welcome back in, and we got two big promotions on Wednesday for different circumstances. So first up, Royce Lewis was officially placed in the IL with a grade 2 right adductor strain. And as a result, the Twins called up one of their top prospects, Brooks Lee, in 30 games in the minors this season. He was batting .350 with 7 homers, 2 steals, a .997 OPS. He was in the lineup at third base, batting 8th. He went 2 for 4 with an RBI in his debut, 32% rostered. Scott, Brooks Lee, your thoughts? Is he a must-add in fantasy?
I don't think he's a must-add. I'm a little skeptical of the profile, I have to say, given how highly ranked of a prospect he is. I think MLB Pipeline had him 13th overall at the time of his promotion. Obviously, the production was good, and he was the 8th overall pick 2 years ago. So what makes me skeptical? Well, it is a good hit tool. I'm willing to say that. Low strikeout rate, high line drive rate, good all fields approach. Should hit for average, but that is the hardest. That is one of the harder things to predict for a minor leaguer breaking into the majors. But in theory, Brooks Lee should provide that. I'm more skeptical of the power. His average exit velocity at AAA, 85.4 miles per hour. Yeah. His max exit velocity, 104.9. Those would rank both of them near the bottom of all major league hitters. It's similar to Jeff McNeil, the exit velocity readings for Brooks Lee. So, that's obviously not everything. I saw enough of his 7 home runs to know that he really knows how to turn on an inside pitch. And as everybody knows with Isaac Paredes, you can deliver power numbers with low exit velocities that way. And maybe Brooks Lee is uniquely talented like that. But I think that's a big assumption to make before he even makes his major league debut. There's enough upside that I think he's must add in leagues that require extra middle infielders, like a standard roto league. But head to head, where you don't need that, I'm probably going to wait and see. I have him around 25th in my shortstop rankings.
Yeah, I could see like an upside case of maybe from a fantasy perspective, maybe like a Brandon Nimmo type, where it's maxing out at around 20 home runs, but usually a pretty good batting average, maybe a little more batting average, a little less patience in the Nimmo profile, but the overall profile, like a guy who would look a lot more interesting. And like Brandon Nimmo's a good player, but like he's always felt like someone who, man, if he just stole 15 bases, it would bring the whole room together. And it never quite does. And that's Brooks Lee had 6 steals at AA last year. But other than that, he's had 1 steal so far this season, only 20 games, but only 1 at AAA last year in 38 games. So 2 in 58 games. I think we can assume he's not going to run very much. And so it puts a lot of pressure on the hit tool in particular to play up in a way that, like Scott said, I think middle infielder, a fine addition, but not someone that I have like star hopes for in the immediate future.
Just to put a little personal note on this, last year in the Scott White Dynasty League, I purged my roster of 3 high-end prospects in one trade. All 3 because I caught a glimpse of their exit velocities readings and didn't like what I saw. Brooks Lee was one. Also Miguel Vargas and Vaughn Grissom. In a deep dynasty league, this league in particular, like trading young high prospects with high pedigrees they're like gold. They're like the most valuable asset. And I moved all 3 in one deal. So that's going to be something to monitor going forward. If my big investment in exit velocity pays off or not, or if these guys turn out to succeed in spite of it.
I do agree with both of what you guys said regarding Brooks Lee in fantasy. I think any leagues with a middle or a corner, sounds like he's going to play third base, so he'll gain corner infield as well, third base. Yeah, I think 12-team roto leagues are deeper. He's someone that you could take a shot on. We didn't get a timeline on Royce Lewis, but according to Google, grade 2 adductor strains can take 3 to 6 weeks. So that's a pretty wide range. But yeah, I think anywhere, we're not going to see him until after the All-Star break, obviously. Again, that's Royce Lewis. And we had a trade. Aaron Savali was traded over to the Milwaukee Brewers in exchange for minor league infielder Gregory Barrios. And that means he will become available in NL-only leagues for those who play. The bigger news here is that Shane Baz will take over Savali's spot in the rotation and will start Friday in Texas. His overall numbers in the minors don't look too great, but if you look at his last 5 starts, they were much better. A 1.57 ERA, a 1.30 WHIP, 35 strikeouts over 23 innings. Chris, Shane Baz is 67% rostered. This one feels like maybe a little bit more priority than someone like Brooks Lee.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he's already more rostered, so that kind of goes without saying, but I do think Shane Baz should be added in pretty much any fantasy league at this point. Now that we know that he's going to be in the rotation moving forward, he is, I think, probably the most talented pitcher remaining in the minors, at least among the guys who are on the verge of getting called up. There might be some guys in the lower minors with more upside, but this is a guy who, one, has already shown the ability to get a lot of strikeouts at the major league level. We haven't seen a ton of him, but 29% strikeout rate.
So I think people kind of have lost sight of how good Shane Baz is and was. His first 8 major league starts, he had a 2.61 ERA, 0.97 WHIP, 10.9 K per 9. Yeah. Now the 9th start was terrible, but that was the start that preceded Tommy John surgery. So I'm inclined to throw it out. Yeah.
So there is, this is one of the most exciting pitching prospects in baseball, someone who absolutely has impact upside and someone that, even with Andrew Abbott's good starts next week, I would absolutely drop Andrew Abbott for him. I'm trying to think of what some pitchers who I wouldn't drop for him. I think he probably needs to be like in the 60 range already.
I moved him up to 61st, I think.
Yeah.
So, Christian Scott and Gavin Williams both could be dropped for Baz.
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
Yeah.
As much upside as they have, and we'll get to them later, I'm sure. But yeah, I'm pretty excited for this. Just in part because the Rays went all in, dealing away Aaron Savali to make it happen. I know Jeffrey Springs is going to return from the IL soon and give them another option, but it seems like they're convinced Baz is ready to roll again. And who was that prospect they acquired? Because it basically means they traded Kyle Manzardo for this prospect.
It
Just
was
no name prospect.
Gregory Barrios.
Maybe he's not a no-name prospect, but I follow prospects pretty closely and hadn't heard of him.
Yeah. All right. So go check in shallower leagues. Make sure Shane Baz is not available because he is out there in 33% of CBS leagues. Some other news and notes: Jordan Romano underwent arthroscopic surgery on his right elbow to repair an impingement and will be shut down from throwing for at least 6 weeks. That makes it sound like best case scenario is that he returns in September. I don't really have much confidence in that actually happening. The other news that came with this is that Jimmy Garcia threw a bullpen on Wednesday and will need at least one more minor league rehab appearance before being activated. Garcia is 26% rostered. And once he returns, which could be soon, my guess is that Garcia would take over once again as the Blue Jays closer.
I presume so. Yeah, he was really good before the injury. I mean, Green's been good too. So it's not unthinkable. It really kind of depends what happens between now and then, how good Green looks, if Jimmy Garcia has any issues coming off the IL. But yeah, my presumption is the same as yours, that it would go back to Garcia.
All right. Kyle Tucker has seen his recovery pick up in recent days and is planning to do on-field work this week. Yoshinobu Yamamoto is no longer feeling pain in his right shoulder, but he hasn't started throwing yet. He's on the IL with a right rotator cuff strain. Corey Seager returned to the lineup Wednesday after missing 2 games with a left wrist injury. Jared Jones left his start early with a strained lat. When speaking to the media after the game, he didn't seem concerned about it, but lats can be pretty tricky for pitchers, and those are injuries at times that could kind of bleed into a shoulder injury and things like that. So hopefully that's not the case. Of course, my mind instantly starts thinking, oh, well, maybe this is the reason they skipped his start. Not that we don't know that, but it just that's what my mind.
Well, if I'm the Pirates, I'm not going to take any chances with Jared Jones, particularly since I'm looking to limit his innings. This kind of gives me an excuse to do that. All-Star break coming up, too. I imagine
he could miss 3 weeks and miss 2 starts if they did it right.
So I anticipate an IL stint for this, but yeah, he said he could have kept pitching through it. So it doesn't sound serious at first blush. Did I use that expression right? First blush.
Sounds right. That sounds right at first blush.
Yeah.
All right.
It's the sort of thing I'd Google before I wrote it, just to be sure.
At first glance, probably. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's not as poetic.
Blush sounded better.
And Scott is nothing if not a poet.
Mookie Betts could return as the team's primary second baseman upon his return, mostly due to how well Miguel Rojas has played shortstop defensively. Xander Bogaerts could begin a rehab assignment within the next day or two. Team officials have suggested Bogaerts would need 7 to 10 days worth of rehab. Justin Verlander is now playing catch every other day. He remains without a timeline to return as he works through a neck injury. Michael Harris began running on Wednesday, but there's still no timeline for when he'll begin a rehab assignment. Josh Young will be shut down until next week to allow his right wrist to rest, and he will not return before the All-Star break. Joey Ortiz was placed in the IL with neck inflammation. George Springer was moved back up to the leadoff spot for the Blue Jays. He has not hit leadoff since early May, but he's been hot, so he gets another chance. And Casey Mize was placed in the IL with a strained left hamstring. Did want to mention this because I wanted to get to it earlier as an honorable mention player of the night. Just a big game for James Wood is pretty awesome to see, only 3 games into his career, but 2 for 3 with a walk, a run, an RBI, and his first career steal. He had 2 hard hits in this game, a single that was 109.6, a ground out that was 108.7. He was moved up to 3rd in the lineup versus a righty. He has a walk in each game so far, only 1 strikeout. It's an extremely small sample size, but looks good so far.
Yeah, I will point out what I pointed out after his first game, and obviously we're dealing with such small samples here that it's kind of ridiculous to point out anything. But since we're going down that path anyway, I will mention that for James Wood in this one, as hard a hit as those balls were, his highest launch angle on any of his 3 batted balls was 4 degrees. And that's my biggest concern for him because he put a lot of batted balls on the ground at AAA. And that's not me hating. I want James Wood to be a first-round pick next year in fantasy. I want it all to go great. But I do need to assess things honestly. It's not hating, it's hand-wringing. That's my new expression I'm going to use when people accuse me of hating. There's no malice. It's just neurosis.
All right. You're right, Chris. He is a poet, if anything.
Really?
Let's get into waiver wire pitchers. We already spoke about Andrew Abbott. We already spoke about Dean Kremer. 2 other names that pitched well. Michael Wacha, a strong start up against Tampa Bay. 6 innings, 1 run, 8 strikeouts. He had 17 whiffs on 97 pitches and did change the pitch mix in this start. He made the cutter his most used pitch, which has not been the case for most of the season. And Colin Ray, a great start in Coors Field. He threw 7 shutout innings with 4 strikeouts. And over his last 6 starts, he has a 2.56 ERA and a .99 whip. Chris, how would you rank all the names we've talked about? Dean Kremer. It's your birthday. You got to talk. Dean Kremer, Colin Ray.
I just don't want to do the thing with Colin Ray. Like it's this. I hate it. Rank these guys.
I didn't even list them off. Do you want to know who they are or no?
Yes.
All right. Dean Kremer, Colin Ray, Michael Wacha, and Andrew Abbott.
Michael Wacha, Andrew Abbott, Dean Kremer, and Colin Ray. I don't really see much there with Colin Ray. He's not even like getting ground balls. I don't really understand it. Like the strikeout rate is super low. His K- walk rate is like 9% right now. His xERA is 5.31.
Yeah. For as hard as we've been on Tyler Anderson, things look just as ugly for Colin Ray. I think everyone kind of knows it is the thing. Nobody's really buying that hard into Colin Ray.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get like, oh, this Colin Ray hate is disrespectful.
He's only 43% rostered. Sort of like Andrew Abbott. He has 2 gray matchups next week, so he will be among my sleeper pitchers.
Yeah.
Those matchups are
not as good as Andrew Abbott's, frankly.
Pittsburgh
I think
and
Andrew Abbott's a better pitcher.
Yeah. Agreed on all 3 fronts.
Yeah. But I think Waka, like we know, Waka's been around long enough. He's been doing this when that changeup is working, especially. He can be a really useful pitcher. It's never an elite pitcher, but it's a pretty good one. So I think he's the clear number 1 among that group.
All right. We already spoke about Joey Estes for deeper leaguers out there, and just wanted to mention a strong start from Brian Bayo. I think we need to see more. This was obviously a great matchup against the Marlins. He threw 6 2/3, 1 run, 7 strikeouts, had 11 whiffs on 91 pitches. The matchups look okay for next week, Oakland and KC. Are you considering him, Scott, as a sleeper pitcher?
Yeah. I mean, just if it was just the Oakland start on its own, I would have to. So I shouldn't be scared away by the fact he has the second matchup that's not as favorable.
But not a terrible one.
Yeah.
What is it again?
KC.
Cubs?
KC.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's going to be in there, I think. I think it's going to be all 2-star pitchers, actually, because unlike last week when there were no good 2-star pitchers, this week there are a lot of 2-star pitchers that are available enough to mention and good enough to mention as 2-start sleepers, which unfortunately is going to make the list light on 1-start sleepers like a Michael Wacha, who matches up against the Cardinals. It's a good matchup.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take our final break, and when we return, we will get into Gavin Williams' season debut. Wasn't really a good one. We'll talk about that right after this.
There are some things in life that you can't quite explain.
An extraordinary story.
Maybe it sounds flawless, looks effortless, or makes you feel like a part of history.
The first ever goal for BFC.
And when all of those phenomenons come together, it's perfect. Pitch perfect.
Welcome back in. We had a whole batch of young pitchers not really pitch well here on Wednesday, and that leads things off with Gavin Williams, who got hit hard in his season debut in what is supposed to be a good matchup up against the White Sox. 4 innings, 7 hits, 5 runs, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. Completely changed his pitch mix in this one. Overall, a weird debut. Scott, what do you have on Gavin Williams?
I was hoping you'd go to Chris because I know he had some interesting things to say. I'm just going to cede it to Chris and react to what he said.
Yeah, no, the biggest change here for Gavin Williams is that he went from throwing a slider as his number 2 pitch last season to not throwing a slider at all in this start. He introduced a cutter instead that came in about 2 to 3 miles per hour harder than his slider. And it's interesting because the slider was his best pitch last season, at least in terms of results. 239 expected WOBA, 32% whiff rate. The curveball was a better whiff pitch. He throws that more in the chase zones anyway. So, I think he may not be losing a ton of strikeout potential there, but it was interesting that he just didn't throw the slider at all. And the cutter, didn't get a single whiff on 8 pitches, generated a few foul balls. It generated an 87.3 mile per hour average exit velocity, which isn't terrible, but isn't great. I don't really understand the thought process here. And maybe it's something where coming back from that elbow injury, he just can't throw the slider. Maybe it's a bit of a calibration issue because his curveball looked a lot different. So maybe there's something where he was throwing 2 different breaking balls, although I don't necessarily see the curveball was 76 miles per hour. The slider was 84 last year. Today,
it says the curveball was up.
Yeah, it was up 4 miles per hour.
4 miles per hour, which would basically be a different pitch. And that's kind of midway between last year's curveball and slider velocity. So you may be onto something there.
He didn't throw any changeups, which was something he only threw 6% of the time. That might have just been, maybe the White Sox didn't have any lefties in the lineup. But all in all, I didn't see much reason to get excited about this version of Gavin Williams. And maybe that's partially just that the results weren't good, but it's hard to ask for a softer landing spot than the White Sox. He's coming back from an elbow injury. Now the velocity was great. 96.8 miles per hour. That was actually up 1.1 miles per hour from last season, but the overall approach did not look especially promising. I'm not dropping Gavin Williams necessarily. I wouldn't drop him for Dean Kremer or Andrew Abbott. I would for Shane Baz, as we mentioned earlier, but it was a disappointing debut for Gavin Williams, even beyond the results.
Yeah. So I will point out his last two rehab starts, he looked great and got plenty of whiffs, got plenty of strikeouts. So the approach can work. It is strange because our thinking with Gavin Williams coming off his rookie season was, oh, look how good the slider and curveball are. If maybe he should throw his fastball less and emphasize those more. And instead, he just eliminated those, it would appear, from the data. And
I wasn't able to find anything on the slider.
Having said that, the Guardians are one of the best organizations in terms of pitcher development, and this is as talented of an arm as they've had to develop in the years since they've had that reputation as one of the best organizations for pitching development. And I don't know if maybe the cutter was an attempt to make the fastball more effective. I don't know. I'm not a pitching coach, and I'm reluctant to speak beyond my expertise here, but I'm concerned, but I'm not going to like write off Gavin Williams because of this. What's most frustrating about it in the short term is that he has two great matchups next week, Detroit and Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
And
in Tampa Bay too. Yeah.
I think I gotta have him pretty high on the sleeper pitchers list. You know, as good as Andrew Abbott's matchups are, I think I'd rather start Gavin Williams with those two
Feels
matchups.
a little risky though.
It does.
It does feel a little risky, but
I think I would though. If you've held on to him, and the fact that his last two rehab starts were good, like you mentioned, with those matchups, I would do it, but it's risky. I get it. It's a fair question to ask.
I mean, look, I have Gavin Williams on like 3 teams, and I have Andrew Abbott on that. So I'm going to start Gavin Williams instead of Andrew Abbott next week for sure.
Yeah. Let's take a look at 3 other young pitchers who did not fare well on Wednesday. Christian Scott, in his return to the majors at the Nationals, 5 2/3 innings, 4 runs, 2 walks to 2 strikeouts. Gavin Stone followed up his 4-hit shutout with a clunker up against the D-backs. 3 innings, 4 runs, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts. And David Festa got hit hard versus the Tigers. 5 innings, 7 runs. Did have 6 strikeouts. Also gave up 3 homers in this start. Scott, anything that stood out for these 3 youngsters who struggled? Festa, Stone, and Christian Scott.
Well, I think I mostly want to talk about Scott here because it was his long-awaited return to the majors. And I'm not as certain he's quite the talent level of a Gavin Williams. So I'm not going to grade him as harshly because of that. I think mainly what happened here is that in his 4 starts back in the minors, which were spaced out pretty well, they were clearly trying to limit his innings. The most pitches he threw in any of those 4 was 81. And Carlos Mendoza pushed him to 98 in this start. He had 4 shutout innings, and then Mendoza left him out there into the 6th. So that seems like bad management. I say that's mostly what happened because Scott also wasn't missing a lot of bats for the time he did pitch. He wound up with 6 whiffs on those 99 pitches, only 1 on the fastball, which he threw 53% of the time. This is a guy who has to get whiffs on his fastball.
Yeah. That's my concern here, is that everything else kind of feels like it's going to settle in the 20 to 25% whiff rate range. And he's going to need that fastball to be a 27, 28% whiff rate pitch to, I think, really be an above average strikeout rate guy. And, it hasn't been that for him so far at the major league level. It was in the minors. I don't know how good the non-fastball arsenal is, and there's a lot of pitchers coming up like this. David Festa, I think, falls into a similar range. Hayden Birdsong is another one where it's just like good fastball. It needs to be a great fastball to work at the major league level, and I'm not sure all three of those guys have that yet.
There's the same issue here too with Scott, who I think needs to be picked up everywhere he's available. Baz first, but Scott too. His matchups next week at Pittsburgh versus Colorado.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah. How would you guys rank Baz, Williams, and Scott moving forward?
Baz, Williams, and Scott.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that makes sense. There was one young pitcher who actually did pitch well, and a name that we haven't talked about, to be honest. I didn't really know who he was before today. Kader Montero of the Tigers turned in his first quality start of his career at the Twins, 6 1/3, 2 runs, 4 strikeouts, just 8 whiffs on 80 pitches, and pretty underwhelming minor league career. He was ranked as the 7th prospect in the Tigers organization, according to MLB Pipeline. Scott, does this matter at all? Kader Montero.
Not right now. No, I mean, the minor league numbers, very high ERA, 5.03, very high whip, 1.7, 5.6 walks per 9. I will note that in the little bit we've seen him in the majors so far, the changeup and slider both have better than a 40% whiff rate. So that makes me think there may be a path to Kader Montero finding success, but we're a long way from seriously considering that, I think.
Can we go back just one note?
Yep, sure.
Did you mention Gavin Stone just didn't throw his changeup in this one?
Well, I looked at it. He normally throws it 26% of the time. He threw it 21% of the time.
Okay, I thought it was his 4th most used pitch.
It was, but the actual usage wasn't that different.
Okay, maybe I just felt like his changeup usage was a little higher than that normally. Then I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
I thought that was weird, but I guess not as notable as I thought at first glance.
Yeah, I think it's a classic example of young pitcher coming off best start of his career. Through a lot
pitching
of
deep into a game.
Out.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a weird spot timing wise here for Gavin Stone. Let's talk waiver wire hitters. And I think one of the top questions right now regarding the waiver wire, Mark Vientos or Noelvi Marte, because I think both of these guys are really, really intriguing. They both hit home runs here on Wednesday. Vientos, his 11th home run over his last 9 games. He has 12 hits, 5 homers, 12 RBI. And Noelvi Marte, his first home run since returning from the suspension, 111.5 exit velocity. And in 6 games since returning, not great so far, 4 for 24. But he does have 1 homer. He has 2 steals. So he's already off and running. Chris, who would you rather have, Vientos or Marte?
I think Marte has the better fantasy profile because of the stolen bases. Vientos might be the better hitter right now, especially if what we've seen so far is true. But Marte was considered the better prospect. He's younger. He's much more athletic. I think the ceiling is much higher.
I'm not
it
sure
might be
Vientos
a point versus Roto.
I don't know that Vientos has an advantage over Marte, to be honest. And I really like Mark Vientos, as you'll hear about on Friday's podcast, but I guess I really like Marte too. Trust him to keep the strikeouts down more.
Mm-hmm.
He hits the ball extremely hard, just like Vientos does. He steals bases. They both have issues elevating the ball.
Yep.
And I think Marte has more job security probably too. So I don't actually think it's a close call. As much as I like Vientos, I think Marte is just...
The thing for me with Marte is his minor league track record felt like a lot of projection. The production was always pretty good, but never wow. It was consistent low 800s OPSs with, good stolen base totals and good raw power and maybe trying to figure out a way to tap into the game power. Struggled at AAA, but obviously, that's, this year was a big part of that. But I think if you ask me who has a higher OPS the rest of the way, I would take Mark Vientos. He's been better at the major league level. We've seen, a a test case for what a successful version of Mark Viento looks like at the major league level. Whereas Marte last year, well, he was good. A lot of it was a high BABIP, stolen bases. He wasn't like a great hitter in the way that Mark Vientos legitimately has been a very, very good major league hitter this season. So I have a little more faith in the bat for Vientos right now. I think in the long run, I expect Marte to be a better player and probably be a better hitter. But if you're just asking me who's a better hitter right now, I would take Vientos.
All right, let's talk about Ryan O'Hearn, who has turned things up recently. Last 13 games, he's batting .340 with 2 homers, 13 RBI, and 1 steal. Overall this season, he's batting .294 with an .840 OPS. We know he's not going to play against left-handed pitching, but, strong side platoon in the middle of the Orioles lineup, that does have some fantasy value. Would you guys take Ryan O'Hearn over either of the names we mentioned yesterday, Andrew Vaughn and Nathaniel Lowe?
No, I wouldn't.
I might take him over Vaughn in like a daily lineups league, just because I think when O'Hearn's in the lineup, he's going to be better. But Lowe, especially, like I said this yesterday, I think the Rangers lineup is going to be much better moving forward, and he's going to really benefit from that. So I would take Lowe over both of them.
It's totally because O'Hearn doesn't play every day, and the other two do.
Yeah. No, I get that. 3 names that could matter at some point in shallower leagues. I don't think they do yet, but some signs here. Masataka Yoshida has 3 straight multi-hit games. Luis Garcia had himself a big game, 2 for 3 with a double dong, 4 RBI. Does have 9 homers, 11 steals on the season. And Gabriel Moreno had a big game, 3 for 5 with his 4th home run, 2 RBI. It's been a down season, to say the least, after a second half breakout last year. Moreno performed well in the postseason, obviously helped the D-backs get to the World Series last year. Do you guys disagree? I think these guys could matter at some point, but I don't think we're there yet.
I mean, Yoshida, he's been super streaky in his MLB career so far, but like, I don't know, if you were relying on Alex Verdugo and he's gone completely ice cold for you, I think they're basically the same player, and Yoshida's hitting a little bit over the last couple of games. So I might be willing to make a swap like that.
Okay. Yeah. With Gabby Moreno, he obviously needs to be rostered in 2 catcher leagues, but I don't think we're there yet in 1 catcher leagues, but it really wouldn't surprise me. Again, the way he, had that second half breakout last year, I think it's possible we could see that again in the second half this year.
He's one of about 25 catchers who could be a top 12 catcher the rest of the way. So in 1 catcher leagues,
I think I might phrase it, there are 20 catchers who could be 6 through 12.
Yeah, that's fine. They're just so expendable. And unless you have a true stud like Rushman or William Contreras or Will Smith or Salvador Perez, I guess I'd put in that category too. Basically anybody but those 4. They're very interchangeable in 1 catcher leagues, and you just kind of go with whoever's hot, I feel like. I might, others are emerging. Francisco Alvarez, maybe Wilson Contreras. They're on the fringes, I think, of being locked in. Logan O'Hoppe, maybe. But for the most part, interchangeable in 1 catcher leagues.
One name in deeper leagues, keep an eye on him. Rowdy Tellez has quietly been doing some things. 3 for 4 with his 5th home run. Last 22 games, he's batting .361 with 4 homers, 16 RBI, and OPS over 900. And Chris, we like them big, beefy baseball boys. So
we do.
We're rooting for Rowdy Tellez to get it going here. Start, sit, or drop. What do we do with these 3 confusing pitchers? Ryan Pepiot, what is going on? At the Royals, 4 innings, 2 runs, 3 walks to 0 strikeouts, 8 starts since returning from the IL. Ryan Pepiot has a 5.08 ERA, a 131 whip. Chris, start, sit, or drop Ryan Pepiot.
I'm so annoyed at myself because I've been pretty skeptical of Pepiot, and then there was a point about 6 starts ago where I looked at the data and I was like, you know what? I'm kind of buying in. This guy at the time had like a low 3s xERA and was getting a bunch of strikeouts, and the walks were pretty good, and then it's kind of gone south for him. And I think the reason why is exactly what I was worried about earlier in the season. He was relevant to the conversation we had about Christian Scott and all those guys, his fastball was hyper elite early on. In the month of April, he had a 41% whiff rate with his four-seam fastball. He was allowing a 218 expected WOBA with the pitch. Those are numbers that you expect to see from a really good slider. Like a 41% whiff rate. The leader in four-seam whiff rate last year was Luis Castillo among starters, and it was like 33%. Well, Ryan Pepio in May had a 25% whiff rate with his four-seam fastball, 296 expected WOBA. Good pitch, but not elite. So far in June, before today, he only had one whiff with the pitch, so it's going to go down. 31% whiff rate in June, 314 expected WOBA. Those are good numbers for a four-seam fastball, but they're not carrying the arsenal the way they were earlier, and he just has not shown the ability to get strikeouts and whiffs consistently with the rest of his pitches, which is weird because his changeup was supposed to be a really, really good pitch. It was supposed to be like Gavin Stone's, and it hasn't been that for him. And so to answer the what, start, sit, or drop,
yeah,
I would drop him for Shane Baz for sure. I don't know about any of the other pitchers we've talked about today. I mean, who's he got versus the Yankees in Cleveland next week?
Yeah.
Outside of head-to-head points leagues where he's an RP, which really helps the value, I would consider it. No, I wouldn't do that for Andrew Abbott. That would be dumb. But like, I think Andrew Abbott will be better next week, and that might be all that matters at this point with Ryan Pepio is what can he do for me right now, because the upside seems to have gone away.
Well, I don't know that I totally agree. And clearly, it's been a rough patch. Apart from last start at Seattle, where he allowed one hit and struck out 8, that's obviously the exception. But there was that 8 strikeout effort. There was a 9 strikeout effort on June 10th. There was another 8 strikeout effort on June 4th. There was 7 strikeouts in 5 2/3 innings to start before that. Like, he's still getting strikeouts. I think a big problem has been walks. Another big problem has been home runs. The walks, though, are something that we've seen him avoid for long stretches. And I think that'll improve. I don't know about the home runs. He may continue to face issues with those. I don't know. I think in the long run, he still belongs on all 12 team rosters. It's just obviously not the consistency that he was showing. He's not going to deliver the consistency he was at the start of the year. But you're still going to be happy to have him around for matchups and other times when he gets hot. I suspect he'll get hot again.
Yeah, I think it's a sit right now for Pepio, and yeah, him versus Shane Baz is close. I don't know that I'd drop Ryan Pepio, but yeah, of those 3 options, I think I would just sit him for now.
Baz clearly has more upside. I think that's clear, but yeah, we don't know exactly how it's going to go for him as he's reintroduced to the majors. So I'd probably keep Pepio ranked ahead.
Carlos Rodon looked better, but still doomed by the long ball up against the Reds. 5 1/3, 3 runs allowed, had 8 strikeouts, gave up 2 homers in this start, completely changed his pitch mix, lowered his fastball usage from 52% to 26%, leaned on those secondary pitches more, still gave up lots of hard contact on the fastball, so that remains a problem here. Scott, where you at? Start, sit, or drop Carlos Rodon?
Well, I'm not going to drop him. I guess I'm continuing to sit him. Maybe not in points league since he has a 2-start week coming up at Tampa Bay, at Baltimore. One good matchup, one bad. But at Baltimore, his biggest problem lately has been home runs, and that might turn out okay if he avoids the long ball. At first glance, I was inclined to be encouraged by this start. You got 15 swinging strikes. You got 8 strikeouts in 5 1/3 innings. Just 2 outs away from a quality start. But he'd been getting whiffs all this time. The main thing is he's still allowed 2 home runs, 7 in his last 3 starts. That's really the stretch we're talking about where he's been awful. I don't know. It may be kind of like Pepio, where we're just getting to a point in the season where players are hitting more home runs, and these pitchers are showing these pitchers who were always vulnerable to home runs are falling victim to it more now. And we're finding out they're not quite as reliable as we once thought they were.
Mm-hmm. Last name on this list is Yusei Kikuchi. He had a mixed start up against the Astros, 5 2/3, 2 runs allowed, 5 strikeouts, had 13 whiffs on 95 pitches. So that's the good. The bad is that he gave up 10 hard hits with a 93.7 average exit velocity against. Previous 7 starts for Kikuchi entering this one, a 7.12 ERA, a 168 whip. Chris, where you at on Kikuchi? Start, sit, or drop?
I think I lean towards sit with him as well. I think him versus Pepio is an interesting conversation. And I think you could talk me into dropping either of them for Shane Baz, just because I think the upside outcome is a little higher. And Shane Baz isn't currently in the majors and struggling, which I don't know if that's the greatest logic of all time, but that's where we are. Kikuchi, he threw the changeup a little more in this one, and that's a pitch that he's put in a lot of work to reinvent this season, and it's been his best whiff pitch, 36% whiff rate. Everything else has been significantly worse, especially the slider and curveball. So I don't know. I want to believe. I want to keep the faith. I like the overall approach and arsenal, but yeah, it's after really like a full calendar year of pitching really, really well, Yusei Kikuchi's been pretty bad since the start of June. So I'm not at the point where I'm dropping him necessarily, but certainly sitting.
All right, let's get into some leftovers and the pitchers. Chris Sale, awesome again, this time up against the Giants. 6 innings, 1 run, 9 strikeouts with 13 whiffs on 103 pitches. Zach Wheeler, a solid start at the Cubs. 6 innings, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts. He had 13 whiffs on 102 pitches. Shota Imanaga, a quality start up against the Phillies. 6 innings, 3 runs, 8 strikeouts, did allow 2 more homers, which means he's now allowed 9 home runs in his past 7 starts. And Eric Fedde continues to produce quality starts. This one at the Guardians, 6 innings, 1 run, 3 walks to 3 strikeouts. He has allowed 2 earned runs or fewer in 12 of 18 starts. Scott, anything that stood out here from Fedde, Imanaga, Wheeler, and Chris Sale?
Yeah, I have some things to say about a couple of these guys, and maybe not the ones you're expecting. Chris Sale, no, I'll get to him in a minute. Zach Wheeler, if you look at his month-by-month breakdown, he keeps getting worse, and specifically with the strikeout rate. In June, 7.6 K per 9. That was after 9.7 in May, 11.1 in April. Remember, at the start of the season, Zach Wheeler looked like he was headed toward an obvious Cy Young season. What he was doing in April was mixing in this new splitter that everyone was talking up in spring training. He was throwing it like 12% of the time. It got a bunch of whiffs, and he's just kind of abandoned it in the months since. And look, he's Zach Wheeler. He's going to be fine, but I'm disappointed in the way it's playing out because he looked like a total world beater early on. And then Chris Sale, I'm not so sure he's not just the best pitcher in fantasy. I was thinking through this when I was putting together the redraft of the first 2 rounds the other day. Wanted to get a few pitchers in there. Tarek Skubal is who I ended up putting number 1, Zach Wheeler 2, Corbin Burns 3. Those 2 mostly just because they're going to be durable in the second half when a lot of pitchers break down. But if I could count on Sale being durable, and I guess I could say the same thing for Tyler Glass now, they'd be 1 and 2 in some order.
I think the biggest thing that I would say for Sale, and this is something we talked about in tomorrow's podcast that we recorded earlier today with Reynaldo Lopez, is I think this was the second time Chris Sale has pitched on regular rest all season. And so he has made 1 fewer start than most other pitchers, 2 fewer starts than most of the other aces. He's still below 100 innings. He's like 23rd or 24th in innings pitched after this start. So on a per inning basis, I think there's very little to argue against with Chris Sale. He looks like Chris Sale, but if he's going to throw 175, 180 innings and Tarek Skubal is going to throw 190, then I'd probably still take Tarek Skubal, who I don't think is worse than Chris Sale, certainly. And I'm not sure, like Zach Wheeler's not going to
I think he's a little worse with strikeouts than Sale.
So far this season, it's been about a strikeout per inning less.
And I would guess, I'd have to open the game logs for sure, but I would guess Sale has more starts of 7+.
He's only thrown 4 fewer innings in 1 fewer start, so I guess he's gone deeper more consistently. But yeah, I think Chris Sale there's a little more flame out potential with him than certainly with Zach Wheeler, who we know.
Well, that's ultimately why I rank him behind those two. But
And
I wish I didn't have to account for that.
I think, I have it Wheeler, Skubal, Burns, Glasnow, Sale. And the top 3 made my re-ranking the first 2 rounds. Glasnow and Sale, I think, were just outside. I also have Paul Skeens as a top 30 overall player right now. So he's not far behind either.
Each of us have the same 5 pitchers in our top 5. We just all have a different order. But
that makes sense.
Some order of Wheeler, Glasnow, Skubal, Burns, and Sale. It could have been all 3 of us top 6, but for some reason, Chris didn't want to put Cole Reagans as his SP6. So you got to work on it.
Because Paul Skeens is better.
Come on. Some hitting leftovers, 3 names who are picking things back up. Isaac Paredes, last 7 games, 269 batting average, 3 homers, 7 RBI. Vinny Pasquantino, last 9 games, batting 371 with 3 homers and 10 RBI. Brent Rooker, last 7 games, batting 370 with 4 homers and 1 steal. The rest of the hitting leftovers, Yordan Alvarez make it 3 days in a row with a home run. Yainer Diaz.
Remember when Yordan was having a disappointing season like 5 days ago?
I think I said those exact words. It feels like it's been a letdown.
No, I mean, what I wrote about him a couple days ago in the newsletter, and that was like, he hasn't been quite as good as we're used to. And it's like, all right, well, now he's on it's 36 homer pace and a ton of RBI, and he's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sounds right. Yainer Diaz has turned things around since the start of June. If you remember, late May, he got benched for like 2 or 3 days. Since that benching, last 23 games, 348 batting average, 4 homers, 21 RBI for Yainer Diaz. Alec Boehm continued his breakout season, 2 for 4 with his 11th home run. Riley Green had himself a big old day, 3 for 4 with a triple and his 16th homer. Christian Yelich keeps on hitting, 2 for 3 with a walk, a double, and his 9th home run. And Christian Walker, this guy,
Dodgers got to trade for this guy.
He loves hitting in Los Angeles. 4 for 5 with a double dong, 3 runs, 4 RBI. Lots going on here. Anything you want to comment on?
I just want to get, Christian Walker in his career has played 41 games at Dodger Stadium. He has a 1053, had a 1053 OPS entering today. Wow. When he had 4 hits and 2 home runs. Yeah. He now has 17 home runs in 41 games at Dodger Stadium. That's pretty bonkers.
Yeah, and Chris, go ahead.
Chris, I'm changing the subject a little bit, so if you want to follow up there.
No, it's all good.
Okay, Christian Yelich. Chris keeps pressuring me to move him into my top 8 outfielders. And I dug a little deeper into him today to see what's going on. Yeah, he's still a ton of ground balls. But he is pulling his fly balls about twice as often this year. Still not a high pull rate on fly balls, but twice as often as his very low fly ball rate, and a similar pull rate on fly balls to his MVP and near MVP seasons. So, we're seeing a little more power production. Obviously, he's running a lot more. That started last year with the change to the stolen base rules, and the expected batting average mostly backs up the actual batting average of 333. I guess my main hesitation with Christian Yelich is he's going to go on the IL with a back issue at some point, right?
I mean, he already did. He got it out of the way, right?
Yeah.
No, that's fair. But for me, it's not, should we take Christian Yelich at face value? For me, it's comparing him to Corbin Carroll, comparing him to Luis Robert, who has his own.
Yeah, I have him ahead of Robert.
And so who do you?
I guess it's just Carroll.
Yeah.
And fair enough. I mean, I don't think anybody would blame me for moving Carroll behind any of the 15 outfielders I have ranked behind him. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just not ready to totally endorse Yelich as a super stud outfielder, I guess, is the main thing.
Yeah, I think there will be some regression from where he's at right now. He's on like a 27 homer, legitimately like a 50 stolen base pace. It's kind of bonkers. He has 19 steals in 61 games. There will be some regression. He's not going to hit, 333 the rest of the way. He's probably more of a 285, 280 hitter. But it's mostly just, I don't have any faith in Corbin Carroll being that elite player anymore.
Well, I did go that far with Jarren Duran. I moved him up past Yelich, past Carroll. I tried to find reasons to ding Duran, and I couldn't. Like it looks pretty unimpeachable what he's doing right now.
Yeah, I think one of probably the biggest breakout outfielder so far this season. I mean, Stephen Kwan's been really awesome too, but yeah, shout out to Jarren Duran. Some bullpen updates for the Nationals. Kyle Finnegan pitched a clean ninth for his 23rd save. For the Cardinals, with Ryan Helsley unavailable, Andrew Kittredge pitched a clean ninth with the game tied. The Cardinals took the lead in the top of the 10th. Kittredge came out for the bottom of the 10th. He struck out one, then walked the next batter. He was relieved by Jojo Romero, who gave up back-to-back RBI singles. He took his fourth blown save. On the other side, for the Pirates, Aroldis Chapman pitched 2 innings across the 9th and the 10th. He did allow that zombie runner to score, but he wound up with the win. For the Reds, Alexis Diaz walked one, but picked up his 19th save. For the Atlanta Braves, Raisel Iglesias picked up his 21st save. For the Phillies, Jose Alvarado back in the 9th inning with a 2-run lead. He gave up a hit, but picked up his 13th save. For the Royals, James MacArthur got the final 5 outs for his 15th save. For the Padres, Robert Suarez recorded the final 4 outs, 2 via strikeout for his 21st save. And for the Orioles, Craig Kimbrell struck out 2 for his 21st save. Remember that little blip where he was out of the closer role for a little bit? I mean, ever since then, he has been lights out. Yeah, and he's up to 21 saves. So pretty awesome season here for Craig Kimbrell. To stream or not to stream on Thursday, 4th of July, who do we have? Some options. Ben Lively up against the White Sox. We have Jose Quintana at the Nationals. Andre Palante at the Pirates. Frankie Montas at the Yankees. JP Sears versus the Angels.
I think Alec Marsh against the Rays is my third choice behind the first two you mentioned. Ben Lively against the White Sox and Jose Quintana at the Nationals, who are especially bad against lefties.
Agreed.
Yesterday we said, Chris, that we like Landon Knack, but I don't know. Seeing the D-backs score 12 runs today kind of scares me a little bit.
I mean, they've been so hit or miss this season, right? Like they've had several 10-run games. I wouldn't be surprised if they had as many 10-run games as anyone in baseball. It's just it's been feast or famine for them.
On Friday, some potential options. We have Drew Thorpe, who is at the Marlins. We have Reese Olson at the Reds, Carson Spires versus the Tigers, and Michael Lorenzen versus the Rays.
Olson by far.
They're worse against righties, I believe.
And I think I would go Thorpe and Lorenzen as the next two.
Yes, you didn't mention Thorpe, did you? But Marlins?
Yeah, I mentioned
Friday?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I would go Olson, Thorpe, and then I kind of like what Spires is doing. It's a good matchup against the Tigers, too, so I think he's fine. Reminder, we're not live tomorrow. Again, happy 4th of July, everyone out there. Please be safe, be careful. Chris, happy birthday to you. We are going to wrap there for Scott and Chris. I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.